Good morning again. We are about to start this session. For those of you that are starting to get a bit tired or bored by me, let me say that I'm unfortunately only here till 2 p.m. this afternoon. Then I have to head back to New York to work back at the United Nations. So you'll see more of me for a few more hours, and then that's it. This session is a very important one because, as Yunus said in his opening remarks, is it ever possible in today's day and age, or even in the historical past, ever to make peace through strength? My own sense, for what it's worth, is that when people are subdued into submission, they will remember what happened and they will never forget that. And there will come a point in time where they will want their revenge. They will hit back as soon as they see themselves in a position to be able to do this. So peace through strength is a good aphorism. It maybe will work in the short term, perhaps even in the medium term, but long term, it doesn't have a future. Any peace that is made through diplomacy, through trust building, through recognition, through respect, through love, through affection, and recognition that if you are strong today, you could be weaker tomorrow, and while you are in a position of strength, that is the time to make peace, I think is the only way in which long-lasting peace can happen. But this is my view. I'm not an expert. We are here with many, many formidable experts who have been in this space for a very long time. What I would like to do is to start with one question for each of our participants on this panel. And I would rather than it not become an echo chamber between us, but I would like at that stage, after I've done one round, to open the discussions to the floor, because I'm sure all of you will have some amazingly good questions to put to the panel. And then if there is any time left at the end, then I will round up by making some concluding remarks. But may I start by Sheikh Nawaf Al-Thani first, who's on my left. Qatar has been one of the most proactive members in the Middle East, quietly behind the scenes, brokering peace, brokering dialogue, and engaging with all its neighbors as well as people outside in achieving political aims that are really designed to make the world a better place. I've had the privilege of visiting Qatar on many, many occasions, doing business there, and I have always found the people in this country extremely resourceful. Qatar, as you all know, had a commercial office, Israeli commercial office in Doha for a very long time. Some say this was a euphemism for an embassy, but it was not labeled as an embassy. Qatar was, through the help of the United States as well as Israel, funding the Palestinian Authority, and Qatar has been absolutely instrumental in discussions to broker a ceasefire if one were to be possible with the help of Egypt. Qatar has played an outside role, a formidable role in bringing peace to the region. It has rebounded significantly from the time when it suffered its blockade by Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, and others. And now its bond with its GCC brothers is so strong that, as you know, after what happened when Israel hit Qatar, the first person to visit Doha was the ruler of Abu Dhabi, which would not have happened in the past. So let me ask the question to Sheikh Nawaf. How does it feel that in these 12 months you have been attacked by Iran first and then by Israel? Did you deserve this? And why has it happened? And how are you going to counter that?
Good morning, everyone. This is a good question to start this panel, maybe. First of all, I'd like to thank the IPD and the Amersi Foundation for hosting us. Second, I'll start with the obligatory, kind of warning that my views are mine alone and I don't represent Qatar or their entities. I don't know if there's anyone from the embassy here who can back me, but for whatever that's worth. Now, simple answer, did Qatar deserve the failed Iranian attack and the successful Israeli attack? No to both. Obviously, having a mediator, whether when it comes to Iran or Israel, is vital. And whether it is Qatar or someone else who plays that role, it is important for all nations to have back channels, alternative ways of communication that goes beyond the roadblocks of traditional diplomacy or kinetic action and wars. In the case of Qatar, there is a long track record, a good 30 years or so of successes in mediation, which historically even goes further than the 3 decades I just mentioned. But for the concerns of Iran and Israel, Qatar has proven a successful partner. It is a shame that any nation would jeopardize having a nation like Qatar or other countries like Egypt. The United States played a big role, jeopardize that influence in finding a way forward for hard questions and problems. In the case of Israel, Qatar, with its partners, was successful in mediating the release of over 140 hostages, as opposed to the Netanyahu government that unfortunately killed more Israeli citizens than rescued, which is very sad, but also very true. In the case of Qatar moving forward, I think after what His Highness the Emir called a treacherous and cowardly attack by the Netanyahu government on Qatar, he showed tremendous, I believe, and we were talking about this earlier, I may not have made that same decision, tremendous courage and I think wisdom in saying we are yet, with all of that, still committed to pursuing peace, to pursuing whatever Qatar can towards a peaceful resolution. And just yesterday, he, specifically mentioned the hostages and obviously the civilian population, just yesterday. So I think that is important to understand in the totality of all of this, what's been going on. I think the steadfastness of Qatar in its long history of mediation is something to hopefully be relied upon. Personally, I think it should be celebrated, but at least relied upon, taken advantage of when offered. And just in the past few days, we've returned British citizens from Iran. We've unified Russian families back from the front, Ukrainian families back from Russia. I think this is something that maybe is not always in the media, but the examples I just gave were just only after the Israeli attack and the Iranian attack. So hopefully we can be an example of moving forward.
Thank you very much. Quick follow-up question, if I may, but I said I wouldn't, so I will keep it very short. Is there a risk that because of pressure from the United States and other people, that Qatar might say to the Hamas leadership that is still there that there is no more place for them now in Doha and they have to relocate somewhere?
Well, if we go back, I think our Prime Minister said it best the day of the attack from the Israeli government, is for the Israeli government, for instance, is to make up their mind. Do you want Qatar to mediate or do you want to bomb Hamas? Either way, let us know, because asking Qatar for help and then bombing Qatar because it helped is not only confusing for us, it's not helpful for the whole process. So yes, the Americans and the Israelis on multiple occasions for the past decade has asked Qatar for help in hosting Hamas and in negotiating multiple October 7th that were averted because of the efforts of Qatar throughout 10 years. So it's not something that comes overnight. It's the same thing with the Taliban, with America. So Qatar is committed, but if and this was also publicly said, if there is no point in hosting a negotiation, then Qatar won't.
I will now turn to Gawdat. Gawdat is a senior scholar, academic at the NDU. He has been following the Middle East for a very long time. He's a specialist on Iran and many other aspects of the Middle East. But what is really interesting, and this I again come back to my example from my business days. At the moment, the way the world sees the United States is that every 4 years, everything changes. There is no way that the world, business, politics, environment, and everything can depend on the whims of an administration every 4 years because it changes all the time. People cannot make investment decisions, people cannot make political decisions because they just do not know what the next administration is going to be doing. Now, this administration started life by saying they did not want to engage in wars. They did not want to interfere in the affairs. Biden's last days were focused on Southeast Asia and the South China Seas. And now suddenly the Trump administration is embroiled in the Middle East in a big way. And once it starts getting embroiled, it sees that there is possibility to reshape the Middle East order that is prevailing or has prevailed for now. In your view, how sustainable is this? There is a feeling with President Trump that his bandwidth, his focus on anything is not days or weeks or months, but more like seconds, minutes, and hours. So is he likely to stay the course in the Middle East, or is he going to just leave it in a mess, walk away, and then go and look at something else to touch? So far, Russia-Ukraine has not been resolved, although he said he could do it in his first day. Gaza-Palestine is not resolved. The Iran situation is in a very dire strait as we speak, as you know. So what is going on in Washington?
Thank you. And first, I have to say everything I say is my own opinion, does not represent United States government or Department of War. And I've been here in charming Ottawa for less than 24 hours, and I'm kind of shocked or surprised. In these 24 hours, it seems to me people are very worried about Trump. And just a few days ago, I was in Qatar conference on Iran and met many Iranians from Tehran and other places in Iran. They were less worried about Trump than I hear here. And generally speaking, many people underestimate the continuity in American foreign policy. Every American president says that his administration, I hope to say his or her, but so far his administration is very different from his predecessor. But the reality is there is a great deal of continuity in American foreign policy. If you focus on the Middle East, American interests in the Middle East have been consistent for the last 56 years. Support to Israel, oil, counterterrorism, non-proliferation. American foreign policy, like any country, reflects both American values and perceived national interest. For Trump administration, probably there is more focus on interest. But even Biden administration, after calling Saudi Arabia pariah, he went to Riyadh and almost begged for more oil so gas prices will go down. So all American presidents, all American administrations reflect values and interest, and they differ more in style than in real policy. And for President Trump, his policy is very transactional, very much what will you give me in return for what I give you? And his administration and in the last 20, 30 years, United States wants to focus very much on China and less on the Middle East. But you can leave the Middle East, but the Middle East will not leave you. And crises keep happening in the Middle East, keep bringing United States. We spent a lot of time talking about the war in Gaza. United States proved itself as the main security provider. Even the attack on Qatar, United States is the main player to put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu not to attack close US ally and very important player. Probably my last point here, I believe it is more important what the region will do than what President Trump or any administration will do. Where I live, we, the residents of, I live in Old Town Alexandria, we take care of our neighborhood. I believe it's very important the players in the region make the change and expect less from Washington. Thank you.
Quick follow-up again. So you say that in the past, U.S. presidents and U.S. administration has been focused on values and interest. The way we see it from the outside is that values are no longer important. It's interest that really matters, and there is a conflict between what we would call personal interests and interests that really matter for the United States and its citizens. Increasingly, if you look at Trump's visit to the Gulf states, he was accompanied by Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent. These are business people. They had come to do deals. They were not really bothered by what was really in the interest of the United States. But, discussions about Trump's golf resorts and other personal issues mattered a lot. During Trump won, Jared Kushner went there many times and built a thriving business on the back of the Trump brand. So this is how it is seen. And from this degree, is this true that it's not values anymore? The United States was being respected and admired the world over because of its values. The Statue of Liberty, we know, every tourist comes there, goes and takes a picture there. That's what it stood for. Today, it doesn't seem to stand for those values. It's interests, personal interests, financial interests, that what really matters. And then the second point is this phenomena that we see playing out now. Is this how it's likely to be after the Trump tenure ends? Is this the start of the United States retreating everywhere other than where there are personal financial interests involved, where it will then stay engaged? What's it going to do?
I believe I can make 2 points here. One, it is not only in the United States, in many European countries, there is rise of right parties and US first, Germany first, Saudi Arabia first, Qatar first. So the deals you are talking about, you are right, but these deals will not only benefit President Trump and his family, but will benefit American economy, will create many jobs in the United States, and also will help Gulf states. It's kind of win-win. And the other point about values and interest, from interest perspective, United States has great deal of interest with Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, this is where the money is. But Israel does not have the same money Qatar has. United States supports Israel. This is American values. Christian, Jewish values are part of American values. And I believe if United States foreign policy is driven by interest, United States will pay much more attention to Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia than Israel. But because of values, US is balancing this.
Thank you very much. I would now like to turn to Mohsen Milani. And the question for him is that Iran today is very different from Iran of 1 year ago. 1 year ago, Iran had its forward resistance in place. It had Hezbollah, it had Assad in Syria, it had support for Hamas, support for Houthis, and it felt emboldened. It felt that its vision of the Middle East was prevailing, although its Gulf neighbors were very, very unhappy. Many other countries were very unhappy with this vision, but nonetheless, this vision was being forced on the Middle East. 12 months now, thanks to the efforts of Israel and its friends, that vision that Iran had has largely dissipated. Iran is now alone. Iran has no Hezbollah in any effective sense to help it, to support it. Assad has left Syria. We heard from President Shira's speech yesterday that this is a new Syria in the making. So the only trump card, if I can use that phrase, that Iran has now is its nuclear card. And it is trying to play a game of poker, and it's quite possible that it could lose this one final game that it has to play within itself. On the one hand, you've got the E3 and the United States saying, look, this is a great time for you to engage with us, to give up your quest for nuclear weapons, and to become a normal citizen with friends in the neighborhood. Why is this not a path that Iran is happily choosing to follow? And I understand everything about trust. I understand that we came very close, and I was involved in the discussions in Muscat and in Rome, very close to getting a deal done, and then in the end that deal did not happen. And on top of that, Iran was hit by Israel first and then by the United States. So we have this trust deficit. In your opinion, will this trust deficit ever be overcome? Do you believe that that another strike on Iran is not on the cards? And do you believe it is in Iran's national interests to find a way to make peace with the United States?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you very much for your question. And before I start, I also want to tell everyone that I speak on behalf of no one. I am a humble university professor, and my views are my views only. And I also want to thank Yunus and his staff for organizing this, and to Mr. Amersi for co-sponsoring it. You asked a number of questions. I'll try to answer as many of them as I can in a short time that I have. Let me start first with the 12-day war. The 12-day war was a unique episode in history of, I think, the Middle East, perhaps in the world, in which two nuclear-armed countries collaborated to attack a non-nuclear armed country that was negotiating with the United States. There is no way of sweetening this. It was a very strange event. And for the Iranians, the attack was equivalent to the terrorist attack by Hamas against Israel in October of 2023. It was equivalent to 9/11 for the United States. I think it has awakened the Iranians to the reality of the region, and I think it is going to generate a very strong nationalistic sentiment in the coming days, in the coming month, years. And I think it has completely changed the calculation of the Islamic Republic itself. The war, I don't think, ended in an Israeli victory. I give the Israelis a lot of points for staging a fantastic intelligence operation against Iran. They did a fantastic job of more or less killing about 25 top Iranian officials and nuclear scientists. of destroying much of Iran's air defense system. However, that said, I don't think the Israelis expected the Iranians to be able to retaliate. They were hoping that the people would take to the streets and either overthrow the Islamic Republic or destabilize the Islamic Republic. Well, none of that happened. Not only it didn't happen, I think, as I said, there is now a sense of nationalism in Iran. Iranians feel that they are essentially alone in the region, and therefore, regardless of who is in power in Iran, regardless of who is in power, and I'll be more than happy to tell you what I think is most likely to take place in the next 5 years, I think Iranians look at what has happened in the 12-day war as a long war between Iran and the United States. The Israeli attack is going to be taught at university and colleges for years to come. It was, no doubt, fantastic, excellent planning. I give them all the credit. However, I give the Iranians a lot of credit as well, which is one of the key points that I believe in. That is, Iran is been weakened, but Iran is not out. Iran does have many capabilities and many leverages in the region. The fact that 20 of Iranian top security and military officers were killed in 24 hours, and yet the Islamic Republic survived, that is an incredible achievement. It tells you that the Islamic Republic is much more institutionalized than people think. Can you name one country in the Middle East, perhaps with the exception of the State of Israel, one country that could have withstood that kind of attack and yet survived? Not only they survived, they attacked. They attacked Israel. I don't know the extent of damage. However, I don't believe this argument. I do not buy the argument that Israel and the United States agreed to a ceasefire because they were winning. No country does that. They stopped it because they saw what they were hoping to see in Iran didn't happen. Now, the question is there going to be a second attack? I think the Iranians are preparing themselves for a second attack. And they are stupid if they don't, because everything is there. Based on everything I have seen, and I don't have access to intelligence, Iran still has about 500 kilos of enriched uranium. They still have some centrifuges. As a matter of fact, I saw a photo of an IRGC guy with some centrifuges in the background, and an American expert, I don't want to mention his name, but he's a very good expert. He claimed that these centrifuges were new centrifuges. The scientists are still there. The capability is still there. And the Iranians want to be able to rebuild their shattered deterrence. And to a great extent, what they are likely going to do is try to revive the axis of resistance with a different orientation. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that they might be pushing Hezbollah and Iraqi militias and others to sort of agree to a mild form of being disarmed, but at the same time getting reintegrated into the state in which they operate. Now, in terms of my last point, in terms of what I see likely take place in Iran, the most likely scenario is consolidation of the hardliners in Iran. That is one likely scenario in which, with or without Ayatollah Khamenei, the right-wingers, with the support of the IRGC, will control Iran. And regardless, again, of who is in power, what you're going to see in Iran is an increased rise of nationalism. This is going to be a key factor. There are two wild cards that can change everything in Iran. Number one wild card is there going to be another attack? I submit to you, if there is another attack, and if the Islamic Republic is not overthrown by that attack, which is unlikely, then you're going to see definitely consolidation of the most radical, of the most aggressive elements of the Iranian elites. And put yourself in the position of the Iranians. When you're attacked, what do? You give authority to security forces. That is the most likely scenario. Now, the second complication that can change everything in Iran is the question of succession. Ayatollah Khamenei is older than just about everyone here. I'm looking, and I don't think anybody is 86 years old. He's old, but he is still in good shape. He delivered a speech with few notes 2 days ago. He's very articulate, and I think cognitively he's not declining as some other people did a few years ago. And however, he's still 86, and if he dies, the key question that is going to determine what direction Iran is going to take is the succession to Ayatollah Khamenei. And if there is another attack while Ayatollah Khamenei is alive, my guess, and it is an educated guess, is that the next leadership is going to be even more radical than Ayatollah Khamenei. I still hope and pray that we can have a nuclear deal with the United States. I still hope that Iran can change its regional policies in two significant ways. A, stop its animosity toward the United States the way it has in the past 40 years. And B, and I've been saying that for years, I've written about it, I've said it many, many times, Iran has to change its policy toward the state of Israel. It doesn't mean Iran should recognize Israel. I don't think that is in the cards at this time, but they can revise it in collaborating with the Arab countries to find a solution to the Palestinian issue. But Iran should stop that policy, anti-American and anti-Israeli policy that has taken Iran to where Iran is. Iran, my final word, my summary of everything I've said, Iran is down, but don't count it as out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohsen. Just a couple of small follow-up, short follow-up questions. So most people in the Supreme Leader's position will want to leave a legacy where people will remember him fondly. And I visit Iran, you know that. I'll be going there, inshallah, in a couple of weeks' time. The issue is that many people, notwithstanding the nationalistic sentiment, notwithstanding Israel's attack, have huge resentment to what he has done or what the regime has done in terms of suppressing their livelihood, their freedom, their ability to be what they used to be 40, 50 years ago. It was the center of the Middle East. And so there is deep resentment, especially amongst the young people. The Israel issue is separate, but their own internal upbringing, their own internal aspirations have been crushed. So with this in mind, why would he not want to take steps which would allow, as you said, for a rapprochement with the United States, a situation where the sanctions can be lifted, where its economy can be recalibrated again, and at least if he did this while he was alive, people would remember him fondly, that he left behind a legacy that has finally improved the lives of its people and allowed them to realize their ambitions. What is it? This must be egoistic. What else is there to stop him from saying, this is not about winner or loser. This is about, what do I really now need to do to improve the plight of my people?
As you know, I finished writing a book, and I send you a copy. You're the only one on this planet that got a free copy from me, by the way. I send you a copy. The book is about Iranian power expansion in the Middle East, with a chapter on Iraq, one chapter on Lebanon and Hezbollah, one chapter on the Houthis, and one chapter on Iranian support for Assad in the Syrian war, and finally, one chapter for Iranian support for Hamas. And I've used extensive Iranian sources to make my argument that yes, Iran, for the first time in many decades, has been able to expand its power. The book was written before Hassan Nasrallah was killed. It was written and published before Syria, Assad of Syria, fled to Moscow. The key conclusion I had, which answers your excellent question, the last paragraph of my book is that, yes, Iran has been able to expand its power, but that power is unsustainable. I said it's unsustainable because Iran has relied too much on non-state actors, on militia, number one. Number two, is unsustainable because Iran has been spending, according to my estimate, somewhere between $25 to $35 billion in the past 20 years supporting various groups in the Middle East. And that kind of extraction of Iranian resources when Iran is going through sanctions is just not something people like. Thirdly, I said, Iran has made a huge strategic mistake at the very beginning of the Islamic Revolution, when it engaged in a Cold War against the US and later against Israel. And I argued in that book that Iran simply does not have the military capability to withstand against these two countries. And the sooner it comes to realize that, the better it is. And finally, which is the key question you asked, I argue in that book that the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Shah, was overthrown in 1979 when he was arguably one, if not the most powerful figure in the Middle East. He was the hegemon of the Persian Gulf. He had plenty of money. He had plenty of support from the Americans. The American embassy in Iran was the headquarters of the CIA, the largest embassy there. There were over 48,000 Americans living in Iran. Iran was at the height of its power. Then what the hell happened? Why did it collapse? It collapsed, I conclude, because it did not have popular support within Iran. And that's exactly what the problem is today in Iran. A large segment of Iranian society has decided they can't support this regime anymore, because this regime, regardless of what it does in terms of its foreign policy, it's pursuing a project of Islamization that Iranian population, especially the youth population of Iran, does not accept. And I conclude in my book that if Iran does not change its regional policies, but more importantly, if it does not change its domestic policies and open up the political process, my last word in that book is that the Iranian rise in the Middle East will be remembered as no more than a small footnote in Iran's 3,000-year history. And that's exactly what they need to do.
Thank you very much. I will now call upon Shira Efron, who is waiting so patiently from Israel. Shana Tova, belated to you first and your loved ones, Shifra, okay? I have many questions for you, but I'm also reserving the better ones, I think, for Prime Minister Olmert for my chat with him this afternoon after lunch. But nonetheless, let's get started. Where is Israel headed? Is it capable of sustaining its influence by using the might is right and the peace through strength strategy? The soft power diplomacy that it had about being the only real democratic country in the Middle East is now somewhat eroded. Its support for human rights, its support for diversity. If you look at its demographics, they were all at one stage being admired. Today, sadly, this is not the case. Why has this happened? Why has Israel gone on an overdrive? October 7th was an absolutely unacceptable development. One should condemn it in the strongest terms. But is the reaction to October 7th really justified? And are the sacrifices that Israel will now make going forward, are they worth what the regime has done?
Hello, everyone. Good evening from Tel Aviv. Good morning to you all. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I almost came, second or third year in a row that I am almost there. Next year, Eunice, I will be there. I know I have many good friends in the audience and some on the stage also, so good to be with you. And because it's on Zoom, I'll try to be maybe a little bit shorter. You ask a few questions in one question. And where is Israel heading? A lot of it depends on a variety of factors. But maybe going to the origins of your question, when you spoke about peace through strength, and you were asking about Israel's, using the only democracy in the Middle East and the values base. But I would argue that Israel's strength was portrayed differently throughout the last few years, and it hasn't started with October 7. There were a few internal issues happening in Israel a year before October 7, the judicial reform, judicial coup, some people might say. But when we talk about peace or strength at large, it wasn't so much the kinetics that we're seeing today, right? It was Israel as a tech prowess, as a place where you have culture and academia and obviously cyber power and water and other values. And at least my senses was the democracy with arguably, if you looked objectively as an analyst on Israel's democracy ratings, it's not something that started in the last. The decline has not started since October 7, but that changed a lot of things. Obviously, what happened after October 7, and I think everyone understands this, Israel's the mess up has been so fundamental and to Israel's security, both the intelligence failure and the operational failure on the day. And I'm sure we can discuss what I think is an operational failure to this day. That Israel has decided that it can no longer trust itself to assess its enemy's intentions, and therefore it needs to eliminate adversary capabilities. Now, within that mindset of, I would say, overreach, there were a lot of positive things that had happened, right? And we could argue that, in a sense, we have a Middle East now that could be safer with with Hezbollah being where it is today and Lebanon having a chance to recover for the first time in decades, for Syria having a future, right? Those are things, for Hamas being a shell of what it used to be. There are positive things that are happening in the region, and the jury's still out on whether these will be sustained. There is an issue that this state of mind is also extended to countries that are not adversaries, right? Egypt, for instance, and insecurities when it comes to Jordan, of course, the West Bank, and there is overreach. But there is a sense in Israel that this peace through strength, and this is something that is shared not just by the government but by others, that whereas we always thought about the U.S. as the security guarantor of the region, right, the security provider of the region, it's actually Israel that is the security provider, and Israel is doing the work of the United States. Israel eliminated Hezbollah. Israel paved the way for a new government in Syria. Israel is the only one who's still attacking the Houthis, right? Providing for the freedom of navigation. Israel is fighting the world terrorism. And this is the sense that in Israel, sort of the peace, the strength piece from something that was largely non-kinetic switched to this. Now, there is a sense in the Israeli government, and it's something that they say, I think publicly also, Prime Minister Netanyahu and others, say Israel is always unpopular during wars, but then it recuperates, it recovers after a war. And this will also happen today because Israel is strong. Everyone is seeing, right, what it can do in Iran and what it can do in Lebanon. And, there's no money, but there are pagers and other things that Israel has proved that it can do like no one else. And those are admirable. And so for now, it's inconvenient for some of the partners, and the Europeans don't like it, and the young generation, but everything is gonna return to normal once Israel wins. And I personally think that, and not just personally, analytically, when we look at all the data and all analysis and where Israel is today in terms of isolation, and this is not just popular sentiment, right? This is measured in actual investments, in divestments, in boycotts, in decline in support, in rejection of Israelis, and there's the official one, then the informal, right? There's all these rejections. I'm not sure Israel is going to be able to bounce back. Definitely not as quickly as before. Plus, there is this idea of notion of, okay, October 7 happened to us, so we can do a lot of things now because we're in a country of trauma. And I always, say nothing, 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 nothing justified October 7. But October 7 can't justify just anything. And so we'll see. It's an important day today in Washington. President Trump is meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump reportedly promised, I don't know, there are some people on stage that maybe can comment on this, promised Arab leaders that Israel is not going to retaliate against the Palestinians for the recognition of a Palestinian state. There's also a 21-point plan for the end of the war in Gaza, which sounds, according to reporting, to be very similar to all other plans that are out there, and all plans share the same characteristics. So if we want to be optimistic for the Jewish New Year, we were in this moment before, but maybe we're in a moment where we're going to start seeing the way out, and it's going to be a difficult way out. It's going to be a difficult way out for, obviously, the people of Gaza. And I think for the Palestinians, it's going to be a difficult way out for Israel and Israelis, and it's going to be a difficult way out for the region, but at least it provides a way out. So, where is Israel headed? I think a lot of it depends on what's happening now, because we're really at this fork of the road that if Gaza continues and present trends continue, a current trajectory, full occupation of Gaza, continuing this operation in Gaza City, but it will go to military rule in Gaza. And, we can know how it starts. We don't know how it's going to end, but based on previous experience, it doesn't look like it's going to end well, or other things. And then with that will also affect the other fronts. It will affect Lebanon, it will affect Syria, it will affect Iraq, it will affect Iran. And this big concept that I'm sure Prime Minister Olmert will talk about also, this idea of how you translate military achievements into strategic goals, which we haven't seen so far.
Thank you very much for your remarks. Again, a very short question back to you. I hear the arguments that you have articulated on both sides. At the end of the day, Israel is a democracy, and it is the ballot box that will determine whether what it has done, what it is doing, and what it wants to do is right or wrong. Why is Prime Minister Netanyahu, if he's so certain that his position finally will prevail, and this is being done for the safety, security, and betterment of Israeli people for years to come, why does he not say, to give me a legitimate mandate, I will call elections next week, and I will see what my people actually want me to do? Because that is the real power of legitimate endorsement of his position. And if there was an election there, do you think he could win?
So, I mean, you have a politician, an Israeli politician there, who can probably comment on this much better. But Netanyahu has many strengths and many weaknesses. But he has a good strength that he's politically very, very savvy, and he can read the polls. And in any poll, his coalition is not elected again. The Israeli public has been unhappy with this government. They've been unhappy with this government before the 7th of October because of their pursuit of non-democratic acts, because of deprioritization of national security issues. Arguably, Israel's adversaries in Sinwar saw what is happening inside Israel and thought this is an opportune timing to act because of these things that were happening, serving very small sects in society and not the margin. And so the reason we have not gone to elections until now is that the people of Israel are very unhappy with this government now. They're very unhappy with the trajectory of the war. And I think it is important to say this. Most Israelis, and polling showed this consistently, that while they thought that Israel should go into Gaza and this was the most just war on October 7, for a good number of months, Israelis are asking, like you're asking, what does Israel want to achieve in Gaza? And Israelis are asking it themselves. And what will it do to the hostages? And what will it do to the IDF soldiers? And, in Israel, the soldiers are our, siblings and children and brothers and spouses. And they're asking this. Israelis are asking about the deprioritization of other issues, the fail to reconstruct parts of the north of Israel, the Gaza bordering communities, the lack of the burden is not equally shared. And on the other hand, we see investments in budgets to the Haredi ultra-Orthodox group that does not contribute to society or economy, or to West Bank settler groups. So Israelis see this, and I also think it's important to say that the IDF doesn't want the continuation of this. So it's a democracy, but the government at the moment does not represent the majority of Israelis, and they know that, and that's why there are no elections.
Thank you very much, Connor. Now we turn to you. Many will say that it is the British that are responsible for every single problem of the Middle East. They are the ones who drew these lines in the sand and then walked away. And now we are paying the price for this. The 1917 Balfour Declaration, as you know very well, had a commitment there that was basically the foresight of a two-state solution. Sadly, this was not implemented in the way that it was foreseen. And instead of doubling up, trebling up, and trying to see why is this project gone wrong, what can we do to right it, it seems that there is a withdrawal syndrome in the United Kingdom. Clearly, if there is interest in visiting the Gulf states and getting funding for helping the UK, this is one. But generally, it is being left to the United States to do whatever it can. The US does not have the history that the UK does to a large degree. And then you have, out of the blue, a statement by the Labour Party that we wake up now and we recognize statehood for Palestine. That announcement was, as you know, conditional, that if a ceasefire was to have happened, then no recognition. If something else would have happened, then no recognition. But as none of these happened, now we have recognition. What prompted the Labour Party to suddenly do this? And does the Labour Party or the government realize that this will open United Kingdom to significant claims for reparation running into trillions of dollars from the Palestinians, to say that you made the Balfour Declaration, this is what it resulted in, this is the price we paid for it, and then finally 100 years or 70 years later you woke up and now you have to compensate us for all the hardship we have faced. How will the UK live up to its responsibilities?
Well, thank you, Mohammed, and thank you, Yunus and the team, for organising today. This is timely in the sense that everything seems so hopeless. And it's probably at times when things seem most hopeless that it's worth putting the effort in. The history here is incredible. You touch on the Balfour Declaration, which in the region is actually fairly recent history in terms of the mindset. I draw on my experience in Northern Ireland looking at a lot of this. As a Catholic born on the Falls Road who supports the Union, who was only the second Northern Irish minister in 50 years to have been born in Northern Ireland, a contested piece of territory, divided communities, the same fundamental religion but different denominations of it. And I remember after Brexit, I had the unenviable task of trying to reassure Northern Ireland businesses that all would be well. And I went to one of these round table events where everyone was complaining bitterly. And I tried to be reassuring, and I said, look, come on, folks, it's only been 3 years since Brexit, 3-4 years since Brexit. It'll take time to bed down. And one of the participants looked at me and said, Minister, the Battle of the Boyne was 400 years ago, and we're still not over that. The history in the terrain we're talking about goes back so much further than that. And for all the talk today, the fundamentals haven't changed with the military action. There is a contested piece of territory. There is a question on one side of the legitimacy of the other. And you have human beings who need to find a way to live together in harmony and peace on that shared land. And my big worry about where we've got to, again I go back to Northern Ireland. I was born in 1972 and the Troubles had kicked off, Troubles being a euphemistic term for the campaign of violence, and the British government decided to have a security clampdown within the Catholic nationalist Republican community, and they decided to go in and arrest young Catholic men who fitted a certain demographic profile from the community that the violence was coming from. And they arrested them without charge, and they interned them, the process of internment. It was the biggest recruiting sergeant for the Provisional IRA in the history of the Troubles of Northern Ireland. And I look at that and the further bloodshed and division and anger and strife that action created. And I can't help but think that that will be as nothing by comparison to those who will now grow up with burning hatred in their hearts against Israel. And that it will ultimately, far from making Israel more secure, will stretch out the distance in which Israel will feel under threat from those communities nearby. When I was trade minister at the time, we were trying to do the GCC agreement, and unfortunately that was really tough because of the challenges that Qatar was facing within the wider GCC area, thankfully now resolved. One of the things that made me so passionate about trade and investment is ultimately the route to peace lies in prosperity. John Hume, the Nobel Prize-winning politician from the nationalist community in Northern Ireland, said that the best peace process ever known to man is a job. And it is through economic development, ultimately, that some of this will, I think, see tensions reduced. The Anti-Corn Law League in the days of tariffs back in the 1800s, the leader of the Anti-Corn Law League was asked to explain why it was when the price of bread was high there were riots, and when the price of bread was low, the riots dissipated. And he answered that it was almost impossible to agitate a man on a full stomach. Let me answer directly the question about what the British government is doing. And I will answer it in context with something that I think is going on in Israel too. By the way, I always spoke only for myself. I don't need to preface that. That was one of the challenges that my bosses in government used to have. And I've never knowingly made an uncontroversial statement in my life. The decision of the British government to recognize Palestine, in my view, has nothing to do with a noble alignment to the plight of the people occupying that piece of territory. And it is everything to do with electoral arithmetic within marginal constituencies with a large Muslim population within the United Kingdom. And Labour's fear that those votes will seep away to the Jeremy Corbyn, Sultana, People's Judean Front, or whatever they're called. Huh? What are they called? Your Party, that's right. They couldn't find a title, so they call it Your Party. Or George Galloway, or assembled other agents provocateurs on the left of British politics. But you could argue, could you not, that at the same time, what is going on in Israel and in Gaza, whilst that's electoral in Britain, is judicial in Israel. It isn't often articulated, but there is a growing suspicion that the prosecution of the campaign is more about preventing the culmination of the prosecution of the Prime Minister of Israel. And that is deeply unhappy. And I'd like to just say one thing about the Americans. And it again, if I may, dovetail it back to Northern Ireland. The Americans got involved in Northern Ireland. Successive American presidents used their supreme power to convene, to get people round the table. And I think for his unique approach to politics and diplomacy, President Trump sits facing an opportunity that has not faced his most immediate predecessors. I think, in the old saying, the darkest hour is before the dawn, I think now could be the moment for Trump to step in, using brokerage in the region. I don't think, by the way, the answer is the UK to parachute in and seek to, in some sort of post-imperial way, pull everybody together. But I think the Americans can act as the brokers, bringing people around the table for the participants in the region, because there is where the resolution ultimately has to come. This morning has been soul-destroyingly dispiriting in many respects, but also profoundly optimistic in that serious minds are still engaged, even at this time of despair, in offering the prospects of hope.
If I may, a quick follow-up question. When we were all growing up, we were educated on the phrase divide and rule and how that is so important if you want to succeed. Because if you can divide, you can conquer, you can rule. Has that mindset now shifted from the minds of present UK politicians that divide and rule doesn't in the end finally help and prevail, and that it is much better to allow people to come together, make peace, and then they are a more responsible partner for, as you said, economic development and everything else. Otherwise, the divide and rule strategy is only going to result in the biggest single challenge that the UK faces today, which is migration. If you ask about migration, it has happened because of policies that the UK and other Western powers have adopted in Syria, in North Africa, Libya in particular, and elsewhere, and now we are paying the price for it. Isn't it time to change course?
So look, Mohammed, you are absolutely correct on that. In my former constituency in the UK, Bournemouth, we had 4 town centre hotels. We were a seaside community, a tourism town. we had 4 hotels given over to asylum seekers. And when, as I did, you would talk to them when they were sitting outside cafes in the town centre of Bournemouth, they were from Afghanistan, they were from Syria, they were from Libya, they were from places that Western foreign policy had directly and ultimately negatively impacted badly. And they were fleeing. Now, I would contend many of them were economic migrants, but they were fleeing places where life opportunities were almost non-existent. And who can blame them, right? Who can blame them trying to seek a better life? Now, the old divide and rule policy has been embedded for decades. But funnily enough, what America's currently doing is divide and unite. It's dividing people and forcing them to form new alliances, new supply chains, new economic trading relationships. It is strengthening embryonic and loosely forged trading relationships that existed previously. And you know, Britain, I can say this because I'm from Belfast, but Britain took a long time to adapt to not being an empire. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking what the US is doing is actually accelerating the diminution of its own authority around the world. Because this isn't all happening in a vacuum. People aren't just sitting and thinking, oh, well, you know, we'll let the United States do this, that, and the other. They're saying, well, we'll respond to this. Look at India. It should send a chill down the spines of Western leaders to see the Prime Minister of India alongside President Xi and Putin. That should worry them. And when the President of the United States says egregious things about India and blasts up their tariff rates, that is really counterproductive, seriously counterproductive. And I think in a sense we've been living in a false reality in historic terms for a long time now. The post-war clash of the two powers, the Soviet Union and the United States, was actually the aberration in world history. We are returning to the old norm of the multipolar alliance world. And I think the United States will take some time to get used to that. You remember the old joke that wars were invented so that Americans could learn about abroad. America is quite an inward-looking country that has dominated because of its military and economic might. But certainly the economic might is being traduced currently as a consequence of the policies of the administration.
Thank you very much. Now I think we have about 20 minutes and we will open it to the floor. I would ask each of you to identify who you are and please direct your question to the panelist. And also please phrase it as a question and not as a statement. Thank you. Start the ladies first.
Thank you so much, Dina Ramadan, Al-Salam Institute for Women Studies. My question goes to Sheikh Nawaf. Sheikh, they are saying after the failure of the US to Qatar on the security front, this leaves Qatar with two options. First, hedging their security options by bringing in new players like Russia, China, or even Pakistan. The second option is catalyzing or enhancing the establishment of a security structure that includes Gulf states. And my third option is empowering Syria to be the new security player. What do you think about these? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. 3 points on that. The first, which is the most important, only Qataris will defend Qatar at the end. The pacts, agreements, relationships are good or bad depending on with whom and how they are orchestrated and how they are implemented. But in the end, as we've seen with the Iranian attack, it wasn't the Americans who led the defense of the ballistic missiles, it was the Qatar armed forces. and successfully. And a nation cannot survive if their own peoples won't die for their country and defend it. So that is a very important mindset you should understand about the stubborn Qatari mind. It is only for the Qataris to defend their own nation. Now, if we're going to talk about peace and stability beyond Qatar, and not because of what happened to Qatar, then I think an understanding that security and stability for the whole region is important. It is not about bringing in players and propping up and establishing certain alliances that are going to make us all secure. But it is about an understanding of the future where forever wars is not the end state, and that perpetual peace could be something we at least work towards and hope that we could see peace that could survive beyond us. And now when it comes to the United States and Qatar, it's a long-standing and ironclad relationship that goes beyond national security, but energy security, education development for the whole region emanating from Qatar, with cooperating with the United States. Many generations of Africans and Asians and Eastern Europeans, including some that are now in the government in the past quarter of a century, have benefited from Qatar education, providing, American universities, Canadian universities, European universities, that may be less fortunate individuals from Asia and Africa, and also Eastern Europe who couldn't attend these universities, have found that venue in Qatar, and many of them serve in government right now. So it's been a quarter of a century of that. So it's much more complicated. Humanitarian aid would add to security, promoting democracy adds to security, promoting education adds to security, promoting tolerance adds to security, and defending your own nation adds to security as well. But thank you for that.
Can we have a roving mic? Is it possible?
Samer Senijlawi, I'm a Palestinian politician from Jerusalem. 2 questions to Sheikh Nawaf and one for Shira. You described both attacks, one failure, one successful. I couldn't get it. If you can a little bit talk. La,
you didn't get the meaning, okay.
Why one was successful and the other was failure? I thought both are failure. Anyhow, second, Qatar is hosting the negotiations, and I just don't understand why is the negotiations coming from an Arab country as a mediator goes directly to Hamas. Why don't you insist that we talk only, I am an opposition to Abbas, but I think negotiations should go through the president. Why do you have a shortcut? Why are you helping Hamas to continue having a role? They shouldn't be the address. I think this should be shifted now. I would like to have your input on this. My question to Shira, and I know you are expert in Gawdat. Not everything is happening when it comes to the failure of the humanitarian aid is political decision. Sometimes it's Gawdat. They do horrible things. Now there is a change in the head of the Gawdat. Do you think this will have a positive or negative impact on the failure of the humanitarian aid with all its details in Gaza, with the new head of Gawdat? Thank you.
Ladies first, Shira.
I thought you were going to say age before beauty or something. But hi, Samer, Habibi, my friend. I think Gawdat, the Coordinator of Government Activities in the Territories, which is the administrative body co-chaired by, for those of you who don't know, by the IDF and the Ministry of Defense, and runs the coordination of everything in the Palestinian territories, is the punching bag of everyone. I think you would be surprised to learn that many of the decisions have nothing to do with Gawdat. It's not just a political ranking. And let me give you some examples because I think it is important to know. So for instance, there is now a new there are new guidelines that NGOs wanting to operate in Gaza have to register in Israel, and they have to vet their Palestinian employees. Now, this is something that it's a huge bottleneck of, I need to look at the list, but I think 13 organizations have been approved out of hundreds that are in the process still. And it's not at Gawdat, it's the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. They run this registration. Another thing, for instance, we had a shooting right at the border with Jordan. This is not a Gawdat thing. The border administration and their labor union are also part of the decision of when you open or you don't open. Ashdod port, which is the main entry point for some of the goods coming in, it's governed by customs and inspections that have nothing to do with Gawdat. So I think that when we talk about the humanitarian issue, we tend to put it on Gawdat because this has the main interface with the international community and somehow took on the role of this hasbara, or basically explaining the Israeli policy. But the issue is, there are several issues, and I can go into the humanitarian for hours, as you know, Summer. But I think one of the frustrating things to people like me who have worked also at the UN on Gaza, and with the Israeli system trying to improve the humanitarian response, that Israel doesn't have a humanitarian policy in Gaza, right? It hasn't decided. It changes the policy a day and night. And it's always very, very erratic in response to pressure from Blinken, or pressure from something in the press, or then Trump says something. There hasn't been a consistent policy that is coherent, that relies on actual factual analysis and metrics. And we're in a situation, and this we have to say, and this is, I think, important in this type of conference. It's a collective failure because Israel and it's the entirety of the Israeli system that is really hasn't developed a policy, and then there's the implementation, and there's no humanitarian czar that oversees all these other bodies that Gawdat, even if they wanted, they couldn't do anything. And then the second part of it is the fact that there's a lot to do on the Egyptian side that was never done, more to do on the Jordanian side, much more to do on the UN side. I'm not even going to, and as someone who worked with the UN, it's very frustrating to see how they're not cooperating. So this is just on this. Now there's a new coordinator of government activities, who's someone who's coming with no background in this field at all. He's coming from the police. And I don't know. I don't think, based on previous experience with those types of appointments of people, that he will necessarily have an independent policy that is different from what we've seen so far, because they're actually more consequential than you would. I mean, they're implementing policies. They're not actually determining the policy. So I can't tell you if you should be optimistic or pessimistic. I don't think that's where the change is going to come necessarily from there.
First of all, thank you for two good questions. And you're right to ask the first one and the second, and let me clarify. I think they are both, from your perspective and mine, are correct. So why is one a success and one is a failure, and why are both failures? One is a success and one failure depending on what is the target. From the Qatari perspective, the Iranian attack did not succeed in spilling Qatari blood or terrorizing the people. It did not hit a civilian location with schools and homes and diplomat homes and embassies. In large part to the intelligence provided and the brave men and women of the Qatar Armed Forces, through Operation Broken Spear, was able to shoot down 18 of the 19 ballistic missiles. Which brings me back to the point of only Qataris can defend Qatar, which was asked about security. But when I say it succeeded with the Israeli attack, it succeeded in terrorizing the population, unfortunately. It succeeded, unfortunately, in spilling Qatari blood, unfortunately. It succeeded in scarring the civilian population by bombing a neighborhood in the middle of Doha, unfortunately, not in the outskirts, not in the base, but in the middle of schools, homes, and embassies. So that was the success that I alluded to. But yes, you are right. It is also both failures. The Iranians failed in hitting their target. The Israelis failed in taking out the commanders of Hamas. So it's an issue of perspective. Now, when you ask about why is Qatar mediating with Hamas, well, that goes to the question of what does mediation mean? A mediator does not dictate its role. It is requested to intervene. Those who requested for Qatar to intervene, the United States and Israel, across a decade. Was there really? Yeah. No, I'm talking about the Hamas situation. Why Hamas? So Hamas was a very specific issue with Gaza, where the United States and Israel believed that removing the Hamas contingent, the political leaders from the scene, bringing them to a neutral space, providing financial aid that everyone hates Qatar gave through Israel, a job is the best peace deal or something of that nature. I think that was, Qatar, paid for that gladly to help the Palestinians in Gaza through the Israelis. Was done because there was a request across 4 American administrations, 4 Israeli administrations, including twice with Netanyahu. Never once, it is confusing, never once asking us to stop, but still asking us to not continue. So it's, yes, again, we go back to that whole confusion. So it is an issue of, that's the role of a mediator. We are not the negotiators, we are the mediators. So it depends on the situation of mediation. It is not for us to say, we'll mediate, but we'll choose who to mediate with. That's not how it works, generally speaking. But it puts a bigger question for the future of mediation. What would Canada do, for instance, if the United States asked Canada, its great ally to the north, if it steps in to help in a situation, and only to bomb it because it did? I'm sure Canadians would be as confused as Qataris. Not that that would happen, obviously. I hope I answered the question. Thank you.
So I think we have time for one more question before lunch. We have one here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is Tina Wu from Middle East Institute, Switzerland. I'm working on China-Middle East relations. And I have a question for any panelist who wants to answer it. So China has been just experiencing some challenges, economic challenges since the pandemic, but it has seen some opportunities with Trump's administration policies. The first is that China is waiting for the U.S. tariff to cause the disappointment with U.S. allies. And the second is that China is really against Israel's actions in the region, but is always linking the suffering of Palestinian peoples with the U.S. to further damage U.S. global reputation, while China just recovers slowly economically. So my question is now, what does it all mean for the future of U.S. global reputation? Thank you very much.
Let me take that because some of you may or may not know that I host also a dialogue in China every year with the Center for China and Globalization. And the headline of that dialogue is, what does China want from the Middle East and what does Middle East want from China? And this is a question that we have discussed with the Chinese on many occasions. The Chinese have said that they are not yet ready to replace the United States or supplant the United States in engaging deeply in the Middle East. They are a newcomer and they do not wish to supplant people that have long experiences, mainly the United States and the United Kingdom. The second point they did make was that they feel that the United States is in the course of managing conflicts but not resolving conflicts. And for China, if it does wish to get involved, then it wants to resolve conflicts and not just manage conflicts. The third point they made was that they only want to do something which will result in success. They're not there to want to wade into something, experiment, see how it goes, and stay there for the long term. They want success. And they always point out to the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia that China very ably brokered, and it resulted in success. And that relationship and that deal has still withstood the test of time. And I think, yes, I've heard the view that they would like the United States to take more reputational pain first and try to, as it were, diminish the United States' influence and outreach everywhere. But I think that really in a superpower play, that's a very secondary goal. It's not really a well-defined stated goal of China, because China is not trying to diminish the United States. China is saying that we have an alternate vision for the world. We have an alternate order for the world where we are happy to engage to empower people economically. You know, a fact that really struck me about China when it was first relayed to me on my first visit maybe 20 years ago, the number of bicycles on Chinese streets were far more than humans. The number of poor people sleeping out on the street was phenomenal. And it is the only country in the world where today it has taken more than 300 million people out of the poverty trap and given them a livelihood. Today you do not see a single destitute person on the streets of Beijing or Shanghai or anyone. You've got to applaud the Chinese for the policies that they've adopted, in contrast to look at the broken infrastructure in the West. Look at the amount of homelessness in the West. Look at the amount of destitute people in the West. It is really something that one has to respect. So I'm not sure that they are to push US down. They are saying whatever the US wants to do, it will pay the price for it. This is our vision for the world. If you like it, come with us and we will help you and empower you. Sure.
Just to add a couple of points. One, from American perspective, China is rising power and Russia is declining power. Despite the war in Ukraine, United States is much more focused on China, and the bottom line, China has the cash. Russian economy is nothing. Some people in United States accuse China of being free rider, that China imports most of its oil and gas needs from the Gulf, and the United States is the main security provider. But at one point, China will play a role in security. What is going on now, China is the main trade partner to all Gulf states and almost all Middle Eastern countries, and the United States is the main security provider. This gap between economy, between money and security, at one point will be closed. And at the end, the fact that China is important global power means that Gulf states and other countries around the world have options that they basically tell United States, you are not the only game in town. There are other global powers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, a big hand to our panelists here today.